Welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News. I also co-host the Down the Stretch radio show on Sirius XM Radio.
Hi, I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports. I've launched into my Breeders' Cup, my never-ending Breeders' Cup prep, while simultaneously trying to figure out all my fantasy football injuries.
And I'm sure there's a lot, Randy.
There are a lot.
I really am. There are a lot. They're falling left, right, and center. It's like the week leading up to Breeders' Cup or Derby. Everyone falls by the wayside. That's what's happening with fantasy football right now. I'm Zoe Cadman with First Racing and XBTV. I'm back in Lexington. I'm here for the Godolphin Awards, wishing Katie Petruniak, our co-host, co-producer, co-everything here at the TDN, the best of luck as she's up for an award. We'll find out just in a few hours if she wins or not. And also Irma Scott, who's up for dedication to racing from the Bill Mott Barn. If you've ever been to Bill Mott's barn, you'll know all about Irma Scott. So lots going on here in Lexington, including a good few visits to a few stud farms. I went to see Into Mischief yesterday, guys. And Forte. I've not seen Forte in a long, long time, and he is stunning over there at Spendthrift Farm. So if you get a shot, go take another look at Forte. Beautiful looking horse, son of violence.
And want to remind you that this week and every week we're brought to you by our good friends at Keeneland. Speaking of Keeneland, they had the only Grade 1 race of the weekend last week. And the Queen Elizabeth II always comes up pretty tough. She feels pretty. Wins the race by 6 lengths. Very, very good performance. She's going to go next, it looks like, to the American Oaks. This race usually doesn't get horses to come out of it to run in the Breeders' Cup because they're all 3-year-olds. And a lot of trainers don't want to run 3-year-olds against older horses in the fall of the year. But, if trained by the right people, owned by the right people, Arnold Delacour, good-looking win. I'm sure she'll be a major factor in the filly mare turf division next year.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, Zoe might have an interesting opinion about this. I don't really know why, but when you look at the Breeders' Cup statistics for the filly and mare turf, and you look at the American 3-year-old fillies who try to face the older fillies and mares in the Breeders' Cup, it's a disaster. I mean, I don't have it in front of me right now. For a long time, it was like, 0 for 80 or 0 for 70 something. Terrible. But yet the Europeans bring 3-year-old fillies over here all the time, and they can dominate. So I don't know what the difference is between the European 3-year-old fillies against the olders and the American 3-year-old fillies, but there is a tangible, huge difference in outcomes when the Americans try to go from the QE2, let's say, to the Breeders' Cup.
I'm going to say there was. And because of that factoid that you just brought in, Randy, it scared anyone off from actually doing it nowadays. Most of the really good 3-year-olds that we have this year, the past few years, are all European bred, right? But because they're over so much the last few years, a decade ago, in the Breeders' Cup, people are scared to do it. I firmly believe now, if you have a filly like She Feels Pretty, she went forward, she'd be okay because her performance was dazzling. I can't believe she only won by 6 lengths. I thought her performance was one for the ages on Saturday at Keeneland. Johnny V rode her to perfection. And she just finished like a freight train. First time blinkers, she settled behind horses. She was amazing. So I firmly believe that, yes, those stats do hold up, but the 3-year-old fillies nowadays that we're seeing are so much better than they were a decade ago because we're having so many Euro imports come in that they can compete and they should compete, but they just haven't been competing because of those facts.
We're going to talk a little bit more about this subject because we're going to get into some ideas that Terry Finley has. But Carson's Run, leading 3-year-old male on the turf, nobody even in his ballpark. I asked Terry if they're going to run in the Breeders' Cup. Oh, no. He said the horse is too slow. Got to wait till next year, and maybe the horse will improve on the figures, and then they would be a lot more tempted to put him in there. So the other thing about this weekend, and we could talk about this virtually any week, there's too much racing out there. There's too much stakes racing out there. And on the same day of the the race at Keeneland, the Queen Elizabeth, you had a grade 2, Lake, where the hell is the name of this race? A Sands Point run at Aqueduct. Grade 2 race got 7 runners, and that's not that bad this day and age. Not a single one was a graded stakes winner. Only 2 were stakes winners. Now, meanwhile, the QE2 is 750. Grade 1 got 10 runners. So you're, by running the race at Aqueduct, you're basically saying the conditions of the race are for horses that aren't quite good enough to run in the Queen Elizabeth II Stakes. I don't know how we solved this problem, but you can't have 2 races for the exact same group of horses run on the same day, but we do all the time. Zoe, what do you think?
I think you're right. There's too much racing, and we've got less horses when you consider, again, a decade ago, the full crop and the stakes races. And, a couple of weeks ago with the 5 grade 2, 3, 1 dirt races for older males, if they'd consolidated them to 2, one on the east, one on the west, it would have been a much better day of racing. So I'm in agreement with you. I just wanted Randy to reiterate, did you think I had a point when I was saying that the 3-year-olds now are a little better than they were?
I mean, I think it's based on individuals. I mean, she feels pretty, obviously looks like she could compete against the older fillies and mares. A lot of years, to my eye, they look like they don't. But it seems like every year, the 3-year-old fillies in Europe are good enough, their best 3-year-old fillies, to come over here and compete successfully. I just can't figure out, other than the fact that European turf horses are in general better than ours.
Yeah.
In most situations, I just can't figure out why there's even more of a difference between the 3-year-olds, seemingly. I mean, look at City of Troy and look at our best 3-year-old, Carson's Run. I mean, it's night and day on paper as far as how fast they can run right now. So I can't figure out. I'm at a loss. But as far as the problem Bill's talking about, he's absolutely right. You were right 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And we've been talking about that for this particular problem for at least that long. I mean, it's worse now than it used to be because of what you pointed out, Zoe, because of the foal crop. I mean, the overall pool of top class racehorses is shrinking everywhere. So it means shorter fields than we had 20 or 30 years ago. But it's just the way it's one of those problems without a solvable solution, I think, other than the old thing that we always fall back on. Racing needs a commissioner. Racing needs a board like they have in Europe to set stake schedules to where you don't get this kind of thing, because Keeneland is going to put the QE2 where they think it works best for them. NYRA is going to put the Sands Point where they think the Sands Point works best in their stake schedule. They're both going to be looking inward at what's best for themselves and not for what's best for the sport as a whole. And you get that same thing times 100 in every racing jurisdiction. I just don't know how that can be solved.
This is kind of draconian, but one thing that I bring up is that, at least, especially at NYRA, and, it's nice to have such a full stake schedule. But if you just got rid of a race like the Sands Point, would anybody care? Would it make any difference at all? And you've got, I don't think every racetrack has to have 3 stakes races every Saturday. I mean, these big festival days are fantastic when they load all the stakes races up. But if I write in the TDN tomorrow that NYRA has done away with the Sands Point, that would be like on page 38.
Yeah, I think we're getting to that point. I mean,
it's going to happen.
It's happening very slowly, as things always happen in horse racing. I mean, look at the Woodward. I mean, the Woodward was a horrible race the other day. It was, and now it's down to a grade 2 instead of. Can you imagine the thought that the Woodward would actually be a grade 2 and not a grade 1, and it looked like a grade 3, if that, the other day. That's exaggerating a little bit. It was definitely at least a grade 3 caliber, but it's it's one of those races that. And there's a long list at every track, of races that probably should be discontinued. Do you agree, Zoe?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. But it's back to the adage that I've been beating on about over and over. Everybody wants their own slice of the pie, and no one will give up a little piece of their slice of the pie to help someone else out. So no one wants to work together at the end of the day. It's all for one and one for one. It's not one for all. And I'm not sure it ever will be, unfortunately.
That's the way the American horse racing system is organized. It's every state for itself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm with you guys. I don't think anything is necessarily going to change there, but they better start taking a hard look at this. Randy, I mean, for instance, the Woodward, I think a couple more years like this, it'll be a grade 3. And that would just break my heart. So I was talking about Terry Finley, and I was calling him up to see what Carson's run was up to and where he's going. He said, you know what? Racing has changed so much in the U.S. over the last 15 years or so, where turf racing has become so important. Why shouldn't there be an Eclipse Award for 3-year-old grass champion and 3-year-old filly grass champion? I would be against it, but I think he makes a good point. The reason why I would be against it, because where do you stop? Do you then have an Eclipse Award for 2-year-old grass horse and that sort of thing? But it's an interesting idea, and he does make a good point. Has the sport kept up with the changing times where races at the major tracks now, 50% of them or so are on the grass?
I'm not sure I'm buying the 3-year-old filly turf horse. But you did bring up a point just then that I hadn't even thought about. How about a 2-year-old turf champ? That will be okay, but not of a particular sex, just on the whole. I'm not buying a 3-year-old filly turf champion. That's when we're going into the juvenile turf sprint and all of that.
But Zoe, you're completely okay with having one award for 2-year-old grass horse.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another way to look at it. Sure.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, the argument, obviously, Bill, is probably your argument that you don't want to dilute the Eclipse Awards to that extent, right? And to Terry Finley's point, you could go down this road in a lot of different areas as well. Turf miler as opposed to turf distance horse. Because we have that challenge a lot trying to figure out who the champion turf horse is. Right? Do you focus more on the Breeders' Cup turf kind of horses or the Breeders' Cup mile kind of horses? It goes from year to year based on how dominant they are. Dirt milers as opposed to dirt distance horses. Now that the Breeders' Cup dirt mile is so popular. And this year, it's going to be a fantastic race, the dirt mile. Do you ignore those horses when you look at champion older male? Or do you like the Cody's Wish situation? You try to figure out, who might be the best and take distance out of the equation. 2-year-old turf. Yeah, 2-year-old turf horse. There are a lot of different categories where you can split up the Eclipse Awards. And I think the main argument against it is that if you have too many Eclipse Awards, maybe you kind of dilute the importance a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Randy. I mean, that's the thing. Is this the perfect number? Maybe, maybe not. But you're right. If you open up the Pandora's box here, and you even came up with some divisions I didn't even think of, like champion dirt miler type of thing. I would. Terry Finley owns the best 3-year-old male grass horse in the country, or as West Point Stables does. So obviously he would have an interest in being able to get an Eclipse Award. The horse has no chance of getting the regular Eclipse Award for turf champion. So you can see why he's in favor of that. He makes some good points, but I think all three of us probably agree it's not the right thing to do.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. It's a busy time of the year at Keeneland, and the November sale is coming right up quickly, as well as us being in the middle of the fall championship meet here. The November sale does start on November the 5th. Keeneland will continue to accept wildcard entries right up to the sale. You can find the supplements entered so far at november.keeneland.com. That's november.keeneland.com. We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland.
Looking for bloodstock that shapes the world? You can find it here. Foundation mares that will shape the breed. Weanlings with prime potential. Your next moment in the winner's circle. It's all waiting for you here at the world's marketplace. Keeneland November Breeding Stock Sale, where the future is found. beginning Tuesday, November 5th.
This week's Fastest Horse of the Week is brought to you by Timberlake. There's a new sponsor for our Fastest Horse of the Week, one of the fast sires at Windstar Farm, who now joins Practical Joke as the only Grade 1 winning 2-year-olds by Into Mischief to stand at stud anywhere. But while Practical Joke ran an 88 Beyer speed figure in the Champagne, Timberlake won that same race with the Beyer of 93 defeating the eventual 2-year-old champion Fierceness. Timberlake was a TDN Rising Star after his maiden special weight win by 9 1/4 lengths, and he was second in the Hopeful Stakes before winning the Champagne. He went on as a 3-year-old to win the Rebel Stakes at Oaklawn and was a close third in the Haskell behind Dornoch. He is new to Windstar for 2025, and Timberlake will stand stud next year for a fee of only $20,000. Fastest horse of the week we have already mentioned. It would be She Feels Pretty, whose big win in the QE2 at Keeneland earned a Beyer speed figure of 100, the only triple-digit Beyer speed figure of the weekend. She Feels Pretty, trained by Cherie DeVoe. How good is her stable right now? And she not only feels pretty, but she is our fastest horse of the week.
We welcome in now the guest of the week. It's none other than Mike Smith, the winningest jockey in the history of the Breeders' Cup with 27 Breeders' Cup victories. Welcome, Mike, and so much stuff we can do going down memory lane. I'm going to start with a question you probably get asked a lot, but what was your favorite Breeders' Cup moment? Would it have been Zenyatta when she won?
Yeah, I think it would have to have been her.
Yeah.
That was a day that I think even other trainers that had horses in the race were rooting for her. It was crazy. It was just one of those. She was that special. She was that good, you know.
This is unbelievable. That call certainly resonates.
And I think her, running against the boys, for the mare first time beating the boys, I think it all had played into it,
So the Breeders' Cup
beating record as well.
Yeah. Breeders' Cup's obviously meant a whole lot to you and your career. You've won more Breeders' Cup races than any other rider, more Breeders' Cup money than any other rider. How is your first mount in the Breeders' Cup, I believe, was 1990. So that was 34 years ago. How has the Breeders' Cup evolved in your mind from when you first started riding to where it is right now?
I believe back then, Randy, there was only seven of them back then, and now you have, Friday and Saturday, you have 7 on both days, I believe, or maybe even more now. It's just turned into a bigger event. You have 2 days of it. Everyone in America and around the world is watching because horses are coming from everywhere. And you have so many, different categories now that you didn't have when they first started. So yeah, it's just a bigger and better.
Mike, you were supposed to ride Subsanador, the winner of the California Crown in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's had an injury and is pulled out of the race. That can never be fun to have a good horse get hurt. But did this particularly hurt? I mean, he looked like he had a real good chance in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
He really did. He was doing tremendous. And going back to Del Mar, when he trains there he just loves that track. Although he's never ran a race over it, his works over that racetrack are just phenomenal. I mean, he just floats over that track, and so I was so excited about going back there. But the good news is, it's just a very minor injury. It requires no surgery. He plans on running next year, so that just means I'm going to ride another year.
All right, you want to play Mike Smith Breeders' Cup trivia?
Sure. I hope I can remember some of these things.
I got 3 or 4 questions for you here. All right. Number 1, how many Breeders' Cup races have you won?
27.
Exactly. Okay. Which Breeders' Cup race have you won more than any other?
Oh, maybe the Distaff?
That is correct. 5 Distaff winners, 4 winners in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That's a pretty nice 1-2 punch. All right. There are 3 Breeders' Cup races being run this year, the only 3 that you have never won. Which would those 3 be?
That I've never won?
That you've never won.
It would be the Philly Juvenile, the Turf.
Turf, correct.
The Turf, it would be, let's see.
The other 2 are Turf.
Some of the others.
So all 3 races are on the grass. Juvenile Phillies Turf, yes.
Then you'd have the Philly and Mare.
Correct. Philly and Mare Turf. And the other one you'll never get because it just started, the Juvenile Turf Sprint.
Oh, the Juvenile Turf Sprint. That's a new one. I don't know that.
Yeah. You won the marathon, which is no longer in existence, but you've won every other Breeders' Cup race at least once. Most of them multiple times, except for those 3. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, been very blessed in the Breeders' Cups.
Mike, you've been moving around a lot this year. You've had mounts at Charlestown, Fairmont Park. What do they call that place now? FanDuel Racing, Monmouth. Do you enjoy that? And why is it that you've hit the road so many times?
Yeah, I mean, I always enjoyed traveling, and then COVID kind of put a stop to all that, Bill. But I was traveling quite a bit before that, and just riding really good horses and really good races. So it's taken me a while to get back to doing that, and I was able to hook up with Safi Joseph earlier this year, and he kind of kicked it all off for me and got it going for me again. And traveling somewhat for Doug O'Neill and a few other trainers, but hopefully it'll continue, and I'll continue to travel and ride some of these bigger races. And even though there are some of these racetracks are like Charlestown and stuff, but man, the purses are huge. It's amazing the amount of money that the purse money that they're giving away for some of these stakes.
So looking at your list of Breeders' Cup winners, we've already talked about Zenyatta. I mean, it's been just some absolute spectacular performances. Arrogate in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Inside Information in the 1995 Distaff. I'm not sure Zenyatta could have beaten Inside Information on that day.
You might have beat Cigar that day.
Yeah, she was unbelievable. Lure, obviously, going back-to-back in his 2 Breeders' Cup miles. What highlights other than Zenyatta? What would you say?
Oh, man, you skip away winning the Classic. I've been blessed to have won some really good Breeders' Cup races.
What about ones that got away? Jerry Bailey, my broadcast partner, a friend of yours, seems to remember like Kentucky Derbies, Breeders' Cups, that he could have had the mount and chose another one, or wishes he had a do-over.
He actually was on the receiving end of a good one that I could have had, and that was Archon, I believe is how you pronounce his name, or for Andre Fab. But Jerry wound up picking him up and winning the Classic on him. I actually had the call on him and gave it up because Alan Jerkins decided to run Devil is Due the last minute in the Breeders' Cup, and I'd gone to Andre and asked him if I could take off, and I said I knew there were a few good riders that were top great riders that were open, and of course Jerry popped up. I said, well, let me call him, and I called him, and Jerry said, yeah, I'll ride him, and so I wound up taking off of him and riding Devil is Due. And of course, you guys know the history of. I think he was 99-1, and Jerry wins the race. So that was one that got away.
What were you thinking during that race as the race was transpiring?
That could have been me. He just had some trip. Who knows? I probably wouldn't have rode him as well as Jerry did. He rode him tremendous that day. It was like a flawless ride, man. He got through on the rail and went on to win. But just ran a huge race that day. And Jerry didn't even know his name, I don't think, at the time.
Mike, you are in your late 50s, which used to be an age where a jockey would have been retired for 10 years or so, and you're still going strong. And it's not just you. We have Perry Oots just won a race at age 70. Jose Ferrer, who rides down in Gulfstream in New Jersey, 60 years old. John Court, he made it to his late 50s. Why is it just, are there a lot of other guys like you taking their health very seriously and working out? Why do you think it is that so many people now are riding, at well past what you think would be a retirement age?
I think it's exactly that, Bill. This is what you said. If you take a look at those guys you just mentioned, Lafitte could have been one of them as well. If he wouldn't have broke his neck and the doctors allowed him to ride, he'd still be riding right now. I truly believe that. He looks amazing. But if you take your health seriously and you take care of yourself and you work out and you do the right things, man, you just look. We don't do the running, and we're not like NFL players, so we have to carry the ball and do all the running and the ducking and the diving, and you just got to be able to have great legs and keep yourself in great shape, and then all that experience on top of it, it's just a plus. As long as you take care of yourself, and you could definitely ride into your 60s at a top level. I'm 58 right now, and I swear to you, I don't feel any different than I did when I was my early 40s.
Mike,
right.
Is it getting harder? Is it getting harder though to keep it up and keep this fitness routine up as you get older?
I guess maybe it would be for some people, but I'm just kind of built that way, man. Bill, I'm I'm just kind of a different bird, man. I feel I get up at 5 days a week and I train and I work out hard, and I feel like if I don't, I just don't feel good. I feel better when I do, and it's a drug for me, man. I love going into the gym and working out and adding new routines and doing new things, and I'm doing this balance stuff now that's got my legs so strong, man. I feel like I'm a kid all over again, man. So I just love it.
So you just opened the door to a question that people might find pretty interesting. For the longest time, almost all your career, your bio says your birth date is August 10th, 1965, which would make you 59 years old. But yet you say you're 58 years old. Now, the statute of limitations has expired on this a long time ago. How old are you, and how did this misconception come about?
So I'm 58 and was born in 66. And it started and just when I first started, I wasn't quite old enough, and a couple of months, I think it was, and they just they just allowed me to ride back then, and it just never changed. I've tried to change it several different times, and it's already been in the system that way. And they said, just leave it that way. It was too much trouble to change. And nowadays, back then I didn't care, so I just kind of went with it. But as you get older, you kind of want it to go back, and I kept trying to at different places, and finally they've changed it at almost every place. There's still some places that still have it that way, and every time I put it in there, I'll put the right date, and they just never change it.
So you fudged your birthday a little so you could ride when you were 15 before you actually turned.
I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but it was long ago. But it had to be in Santa Fe in 1982 at some point, and it just never changed. I always try to change it even back then, and they just kind of left it that way.
Hey, Mike, you were talking about losing the mount on our Kong. There's another horse, and it also involves Jerry Bailey, but you were at one point the rider of Cigar, and you had to take off of him to ride. I don't think the Don was the first time you took off him, but anyways, you got off him, and then you got on Jerry Bailey, got on Cigar. I always feel that the 1995 Don, the racing got robbed of what it might have been the greatest race we've ever seen. Cigar versus Holy Bull. Holy Bull pulled up in that race and never ran again. You rode both horses at some points during their career. Who would have won that race?
Well, I would like to thought that I would have, but you don't know, do you? You just don't know. Cigar was just starting to become the horse that he became to be, and I think Holy Bull certainly had a bigger resume at that point. It was probably, if not the favorite. I think he was a favorite actually going into the race, and all I can say was I was in front when it happened, when he got hurt. So at that point, I was a good neck in front, maybe even a half a length when it happened. But yeah, it certainly did get robbed of not only a great horse race that would have probably developed in that race, but of a great horse that was probably going to go on to do some other great things. After that race, I believe he was going to head to California and run out here. But of course, he wound up bowing in that race and never got a chance to. But it would have been fun to see what would have become, what would have happened.
So you've been a TV analyst on Fox. Let's put your analyst hat back on here. We mentioned our Kong, who won the Breeders' Cup Classic, despite the fact that he had never run on dirt before. He was making the transition. This year, people are going to be trying to figure out whether City of Troy will be able to make that transition from turf to dirt in the Classic. What are your thoughts on the challenge that a horse like City of Troy faces against some good, really good American dirt horses this year in the Classic?
Well, kickback would be one to start with. He's never had that kind of kickback into his face. When you run on turf, you don't get that steady flow of sand that's going to be hitting him. Dirt is certainly harder to get through than turf. It's more demanding, so you can't stop and start on dirt near as much as you can the grass, or if at all. The idea of dirt is to have a good smooth trip. So he's certainly bred for dirt. I mean, his dad was Justify, of course. He's pretty tactical. He doesn't he ain't going to be 10, 15 lengths out of it. He should be somewhat tactical, which could keep some of that kickback off his face. And as long as they got him fit enough to run a mile and a quarter over the dirt, I see no problem with it. I think he'd be. I think his resume so far and the kind of type of horses he's been running against in Europe, I mean, he certainly belongs. He deserves a chance.
The stop and start thing I've never heard before. Explain that.
Well, on turf you cover up, right? It's very important to save ground because it's easy to get going again. You can cover a horse up and you can tap on the brakes here and there to hold them down in there, and then when the hole does open up, they accelerate really easy over the grass. They get over it better, easier. If you stop and start on the dirt, it's much harder to get going again. And you'll lose a race that way a lot of times. Is it a
traction thing? They can't get the same traction that they can on grass to quickly accelerate?
Yes, it's deeper. Dirt is deeper, of course. It's naturally deeper and it's harder to get through than turf is. Turf, you run right over the top of the ground. It's pretty easy to get through. Especially at Del Mar, it's going to be deeper and it's more demanding. If you have to stop at a crucial point on the dirt, you just don't get going again, and unless you're much the best. But in these types of races, you ain't going to be much the best. You have to stop at a crucial point on the dirt. You just can't accelerate again as quick, or if at all. Some horses just completely give up.
If you were riding him, how would you try to handle those situations?
I would certainly want to get him out of there well, get him in a good, comfortable spot where I'm not getting too much kickback, and just try and have the smoothest trip as possible. And a lot of times a smooth trip can be down in the pocket on the dirt. It's just you just don't want to stop and start too much. I mean, you can still sit down in there in the pocket as long as the horses that you're in front of can continue to take you to where you need to go. But yeah, I would just ride him out of there, get him in a good spot, and put my hands down and see how he's handling everything.
Mike, I got to ask you the question now that you've been asked 75,000 times and probably getting pretty sick of it. But now that Randy caught you in the lie about your age, that we know that you're really only 58, and you said you don't see any reason why jockeys can't prosper into their 60s. Is your answer the same as pretty much it's always been? You're going to keep doing this as long as you feel that you can help the horse or you're not hindering the horse?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. And I mean, even as of late, man, I've had people are starting to use me again all of a sudden. As long as I can, as long as I'm getting opportunities. Had a good week this week, and I'm doing really well. And it's not showing that I'm in my age that I still have my legs. I'm strong down the lane. I'm still working out every bit as hard as I was before, and still able to do it. If I stop now, Bill, man, I would go nuts, man. I'd sit here as fit as I am, as good as I feel, I would just, I feel like I'm just robbing myself of this great sport, something that I really love to do. I mean, I enjoy riding right now just as much, if not more, than I ever have. I mean, I'm having fun. I love it when I can go out there at my age and beat these guys, man. It's a blast. As long as I'm riding the right horses, you can do that.
Well, you've won multiple Kentucky Derbies. You've won the Triple Crown, which is something that would be, a unachievable dream for most top jockeys out there. You've won more Breeders' Cup races than any other rider. What's the bucket list left? I mean,
just do some of this all over again. I've always, for whatever reason, early on in my life, said I was going to win 3 Derbies, and I've told myself that since the day I started. And I got one more to go. I need to win one more Derby.
Well, Mike Smith, thanks so much for spending some time with us today on the TDN Writers Room broadcast as our guest of the week. And good luck going forward. And it's good to see that you're still ready to go, even though you lied about your age, but in a good way. So, Mike, thanks so much, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
TDN Writers Room also brought to you by our good friends at the PHBA, the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. This weekend at the Maryland Million, a Pennsylvania bred stole the show in the distaff. Her name, Foxy Jr., a homebred for Diane Stern. She won the $100,000 Maryland distaff for her second straight stakes win after taking the $100,000 Plum Pretty Stakes at Parks for Pennsylvania breds in her most recent start. Foxy Jr. is now 5 for 6 this year for trainer Bernard Houghton. To find out more about why it would help you, why it would help your pocketbook and your fun to breed and own in the state of Pennsylvania, visit www.pabred.com or call 610-444-1050.
PA Bred, I think we've built a brand at this point.
It's excitement at every step.
Roses for Deborah just set a new track record.
On average, for the past decade, Pennsylvania paid over $28 million a year in Breeders' Awards, restricted races, and owner bonuses. Plus, PA Bred shine on the world's biggest stage. Just 3 states have bred more Breeders' Cup winners. Learn more at pabred.com.
In this week's edition of First Things First, I caught up with a very special guy, Phil D'Amato, who finally hit his mark, win number 1,000. Phil, how does it feel to be here with your whole family and get this 1,000 win under your belt with a homebred?
No, it's unbelievable, to, again, share it with my family who all help, this great team we have win these races. So to celebrate it with a homebred that I bred by a really great stallion in Grayson that's, done wonders for my barn. It's just really cool.
Talk about the beginning, because you and Sherry come via Mike Mitchell. And what did he mean to you as a trainer and a friend and a confidant and a mentor, and to be here in the winner's circle right now?
Yeah, no, it's kind of really touching because Mike treated me like a son. And he never got, everybody knows him in California as being one of the top trainers for decades, but he really never got the recognition due to him because he was an amazing trainer, could train any kind of racehorse, and was one of the best teachers there was. And also, I started with the late, great Chuck Simon, who passed away this year. So Chuck, I'm sure you're up there looking down on me as well. So I had 2 great mentors, and I got my 1,000th this year. So just very special.
Sherry, you've been with him every step of the way. What does it mean for you? Because you've been through the ups, the downs, the sideways, and everything from Mike to now.
Yeah, from Mike to now. Yeah, Mike was amazing. It is emotional for all of us because Mike was definitely still is my heart. His family still is our family. So we're just very thankful, very blessed. Honestly, just very blessed. And to have my daughter come along later on in the years and start riding. It's really fun to be out there with her, riding with her. And this one, I don't think he cares about riding, but it's okay.
He's going to hit some golf balls later, right, Ryan?
I'm there for support.
How are we celebrating tonight, guys?
Yeah, going home and barbecue.
Going home and
Family barbecue.
We're going to watch the Dodgers tonight. Come on.
All right. Good luck, guys. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Many thanks to trainer Phil D'Amato. And yes, that was nice to hear an ode to not only Mike Mitchell, but also to the late Chuck Simon as well. So congratulations on Phil D'Amato with his 1,000th win. Many, many more to come. All right, Santa Anita does continue this weekend with a 3-day racing weekend starting on Friday at 1 o'clock post times. Stakes races on Saturday. We'll have the Anokia Stakes along with the Fall Fun Fest and Biriano. Lucha Libre, I know you'll like to be there for that, Randy. Lots of micheladas and mariachis, all things going on at Santa Anita this coming weekend. You like micheladas, right, Randy?
I do. Yes, I do.
I love a michelada. And they make really good ones there. In this week's segment of News You Can Use, presented by Darley, we go across the pond once more to our own Emma Berry. Emma, how's it going over there and how's the rain?
Still raining. Unfortunately, it looks like we're getting into heavy ground this weekend for Champion Stakes. But before that, we're still sort of only just over halfway through the colossal Tatzel's October yearling sale in Newmarket. So we're into the second week and book 2. But book 1 was I think it was described by the Tatzel's chairman, Edmund Marnie, as outlandish, and I would back him up on that because I could barely stay in my seat for running around chasing people buying 7-figure lots. I've never known a sale like it.
I mean, it was hot on the heels of what basically has been happening over here stateside, September sale, Resolute Racing, and now we have Kia and Ammo Racing. What's been the general feeling about Ammo Racing buying everything in sight? How many times did you have to interview Kia?
Well, yeah, he did. He initially said he didn't do interviews, but then he did consent to some interviews, and he works with bloodstock agent Alex Elliott, who's also called up quite a lot to speak about what they were doing. As you know, he was active. The team was active at Keeneland September, and even more so here in Newmarket. I mean, I don't think anyone could have predicted the level at which they spent last week. It was around sort of 22 million guineas, and mostly, some of them on their own, some in partnership with Al Shakab Racing, and they were driving the market as well as underbidders to, Sheikh Mohammed, the Godolphin team, Coolmore. Godolphin was the biggest spender and Ammo very close up there as well. Between those two, just those two entities, they accounted for about 35% of the turnover of Book 1, which was sort of the equivalent of roughly $175 million for 345 horses altogether. So, I mean, it was a phenomenal week. And along with Keeneland September would certainly be the strongest sale that's taken place anywhere this year, I would say.
Is Sheikh Tamim and Wathan Racing basically focusing their spending sprees on ready-made racehorses as opposed to buying young horses at sales, or are they really involved in the sales as well?
A bit of both. A lot of in-training purchases through this season and last, and they tend not to identify themselves in the yearling sales process. But their agent is Richard Brown of Blandford Bloodstock. Now, he does buy for a lot of other people as well. And he was the sort of third, or Blandford Bloodstock as the agency was the third leading buyer at Book 1. And I'm sure that a number of those purchases will end up running in the Wathan Racing Silks. They're another team sort of amassing, a really sort of strong team of, well-bred horses that, you have to think they're going to be going down the road of eventually standing stallions and obviously having a decent broodmare band, as that's the focus now for Ammo Racing. They've got some nice horses to retire to stud, including King of Steel, who won the Champion Stakes this time last year. And that's how their focus is shifting as well, along with some other new players like Salhir Stud from Saudi Arabia. I mean, there's a lot of emerging nations coming through and seeming to focus their buying on Europe and starting breeding operations in Britain, which obviously will help this country.
This would be for Zoe as much as Emma. So, Zoe, why would a buyer like Sheikh Tamim want not to identify themselves after the fact, after they've actually, not during the bidding process, I understand that, but after they purchased? I mean, why the secrecy?
I've got no idea. Like, I don't know what the deal is with that, because Emma, we all know it all comes out in the end. Like, there's no hiding anything anymore.
Well, no, as soon as the horses are registered as in training or entered for races, we know who they're running for. I don't know. That's been a little bit their profile at public auctions, certainly, possibly to do with him being the emir and the head of the state in Qatar. Albeit Sheikh Mohammed from Dubai was there all week through Book One last week, and very obviously bidding alongside his agent Anthony Stroud. So I guess it just depends on the individuals, and at this moment they're sort of a little bit more private in the initial stages of their purchases.
Have there been any surprises as far as freshman sire, new sires, anything that really hit the mark that was a surprise, or perhaps wasn't, just sold like hotcakes so far?
No real surprises. I mean, I think a lot of people were expecting the St Mark's Basilica yearlings to sell well. He was the champion 2-year-old, champion 3-year-old, and he's they've been well supported. A stallion who's sort of figuring a little bit more at Book 2 this week. He's got very small books. That's Study of Man. He's got a very interesting runner on Saturday, favourite for the champion fillies and mares stakes. That's Kalpana, the Jubmont filly. And Study of Man is an extraordinarily well-bred horse. He's by Deep Impact, and he's out of a Stormcat daughter of the great Miesk. I mean, you hardly find a nicer pedigree than that, in my opinion. And he's covered quite small books at Landwade Stud in Newmarket, but his runners, especially now he's got his first 3-year-olds this year, and they've really made quite a splash, from the numbers that he has on the ground. And he's starting to sort of rise in some people's opinions. And, he's a couple of his yearlings particularly sold very well yesterday, one going to Joseph O'Brien, one going over to France to Andre Fabre. They're starting to get into those bigger yards. So he's going to be a stallion to keep an eye on. He's quite an under-the-radar horse, really. But it'll be interesting to see how he develops as he covers bigger books. And he certainly did cover, I think, around just over 100 this year. So we'll be seeing hopefully some more from him. I think he's a really interesting horse.
Well, now that I've exhausted my supply of sales questions, which would be one, let me move on to racing. The British Champions Day. That's something that we all follow over here, if for no other reason than we typically get some Breeders' Cup horses out of Champions Day, especially from the Coolmore contingent. So tell us about some of the horses we can be really focused on this weekend.
Well, I promised myself I wouldn't mention Kyprios again, because I think I mention him every time I come in here. But Kyprios is running on Saturday in the Long Distance Cup. He's just the best there around, and he's a terrific horse. Just an absolute one of those heart on his sleeve horses that just is fantastic to follow. So he'll be favourite for the Long Distance Cup. And then I mentioned Kalpana earlier, who's also favourite for the fillies and mares. The two, it's 4 Group 1 races and a Group 2 on Saturday. The 2 big Group 1s, if you like, in my opinion, the Queen Elizabeth II Stakes. And we're going to see Tamfana coming back from the Sun Chariot, hopefully. She won her first Group 1 just a couple of weeks ago at Newmarket. Very interesting filly on the up for also an on-the-up trainer, David Menuisier, who's French but trains in Britain. And he's a real trainer to follow, in my view. He gets terrific results from horses not bought really expensively. This filly cost 20,000 euros at the German yearling sale a couple of years ago. She's by Soldier Hollow, who is a terrific stallion in Germany, but is not high profile here. So she's going to be interesting going up against Charin, who's sort of champion miler elect in Britain. He's about to retire actually to Sumbe in France next year, but he's been a terrific horse for Nolan Bizikov and his trainer Roger Varian. But probably what could be story of a few weekends ago at Newmarket is a horse called Prague, and he's been supplemented for the QE2. And he's one that got away from Coolmore. It doesn't happen very often, but this time last year, his owner Amadeo Dal Pos, who is also his rider and is also the head lad for his trainer Dylan Cunha, bought him for 10,000 guineas at the horses training sale. And he's now a Group 2. He hadn't raced before that. He's a 4-year-old. He's run this year, and he's now a Group 2 winner who's been supplemented for the QE2. And it would be quite a story if, within a year of buying him for such a relatively small amount, he's now lining up in a Group 1 on one of the biggest days in Britain. So that's going to be a lovely story to follow. And Champion Stakes itself, we've got Economics, who's, the horse that a lot of people are talking about here. He's unbeaten this season in 4 runs. He won the Irish Champion Stakes, beating August Rodin, and he's now going up against Calandigan, who was second to City of Troy last time at York in the Juddmonte International. So that's a real sort of British-French clash, William Haggis against Francis Graffard, 2, very exciting 3-year-olds taking each other on. And one horse in that race I just think probably might be overlooked but shouldn't be is another French raider, Irazine, who's a 7-year-old but loves the soft ground, is very versatile over distance, and I think actually should be taken quite seriously on Saturday, even with those 2 big horses in the race.
Economics would be the one to follow, right? Unbeaten in 4 starts. He missed the Derby. He is the headline horse. How's he going to handle the ground? And do we know where we're running? Because round course, flat course, jumps course, which course are we going on while the cats and dogs keep falling?
They haven't quite made the final decision as far as I'm aware at this stage, but it looks like they're going to be going to the inner track, which is, used as the jumps track through the winter, but obviously hasn't been raced on through the summer. So, hopefully the ground will be a little better there. It's a question mark over how he'll handle really testing ground. He's a big, powerful, long striding horse. Hopefully he'll get through it. It's obviously going to be the same for all of them. Calandigan won at Royal Ascot on completely different ground. So it's going to be a test, and it's a bit of an unknown, but he is the horse that people will want to see on Saturday. Economics, no question.
17 have been declared. I think Aiden had 6 or 7. Do we know which ones are going? I know Los Angeles. Can he bounce back from the Arc? I mean, that's a tough go. Would he be going? Do we know yet?
No, I mean, final decks will be made on Thursday morning. So we'll sort of hear the very final line of the confirmation stage on Monday. Yeah, they've all stood their ground, and I guess he will wait and see, because as you say, it's quite a quick turnaround from the Arc, which was running quite testing ground itself. So it's obviously a question of how much that's taken out of him. So yes, it's unknown at the moment exactly which of their team will turn up, but they'll have something, that's for sure. And Los Angeles is obviously the standout of the entries at the moment from Ballydoyle.
Obviously over here right now, as you know, everything's the focus is sort of shifted towards the Breeders' Cup. And one of the challenges that I face every year about this time is that a lot of times the European contingent doesn't really get solidified until you get even closer to the Breeders' Cup than we are now, even after British Champions Day. I mean, we know about City of Troy. We know Godolphin's keen on Notable Speech coming over for the mile. I've read about Big Evs coming for the turf sprint and his young mate Big Mojo for the juvenile turf sprint. Maybe Facteur Cheval for the classic. He's American owned now. So what are some of the other European horses, if you have your ear to the ground, about that we might be looking forward to seeing for the Breeders' Cup?
Well, I gather Ramatuelle is coming from France for the Breeders' Cup Mile as well. I saw Notable Speech actually have a workout on Saturday morning on the racecourse at Newmarket, and he's looking in great order. And that's obviously, as you say, been his long-stated aim to try to get his trainer, Charlie Appleby's 4th consecutive Breeders' Cup Mile win, which would be quite something. But Ramatuelle, absolutely, she's been a filly that has been sort of knocking on the door all season in the top races, and then was extremely impressive in the Prix de la Forêt on Earth Day. That's 7 furlongs. But she can definitely cope with the mile as well. And her trainer, Christopher Head, son of the legendary Freddie Head, is absolutely intent on bringing her to America. And that's, I think, should be a very interesting contender there, along with, I'm presuming, Porta Fortuna, who has been, an absolute revelation this season in all the top mile races. She's an absolute standout filly, and American owned as well, and was obviously over last year too. So for Donica O'Brien, I'm sure she'll be returning. And then I think possibly in the turf, we could look out for JRB, who is a Group 2 winner here. He's a decent horse. He was second to Economics in the summer in Deauville, and he's trained by Brian Meehan, who's won the turf twice with Dangerous Midge and obviously Red Rocks, of course. So, he's a trainer that loves to loves to aim at the Breeders' Cup when he's got a good one, and JRB is a horse that needs to take another step forward, but that seems to be the plan for him to come for the turf as well.
Thanks for that.
Good stuff, Emma.
Yeah, thanks for the pronunciation on Rama 2L, by the way. I was wondering about that.
Emma, I got one more question. I just happened to pop on your Twitter before we got on. Who are rattlesnakes?
Oh,
There's
this
a picture of a band.
Promotions. Yeah, and I can't believe it was an album, Rattlesnakes. It was the first album for Lloyd Cole and the Commotions, and I'm really showing my age now that that's one of my favourite albums of all time, and it's 40th anniversary this week, so there we go.
I'll have to look it up. And you too, that's you, Randy. Rattlesnakes, let's look it up.
Have we transitioned to music now? Is that where we are? Okay. I think Rattlesnake. I haven't heard of that horse.
There's a good name for a horse, actually. I might use that in the future.
It could be, yes.
There is a horse over here that was called Rattlesnake. I think he's been retired right now.
Okay.
All right. Well, Emma, thank you so much for joining us. That was Emma Berry with News You Can Use. You heard Emma Berry talk about some of Night of Thunder's runners in the upcoming British Champions Day and what a year he's having. His 3-year-old colt Economics won the Grade 1 Irish Champion Stakes, and Desert Flower took the Grade 1 Fillies Mile on Friday. He is also the sire of the brilliant Royal Ascot winner Fairy Godmother and the undefeated exciting Grade 3 Stakes winner Ombudsman. They are among 16 stakes winners he had in 2024, a year in which he also notched his first $1 million Euro yearling. He is most definitely a sire on the rise.
Night of Thunder. Night of Thunder. He's definitely the heir apparent to Dubawi from what I've seen.
Desert Flower will remain unbeaten.
Thumping Night Cockaracha. Economic!
Be a smarter, better with XB TV. The best horses. With thousands of exclusive morning workouts. All at your fingertips and delivered right into your inbox. Everything you need to be informed. Be smart. Bet smart with XB TV.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XB TV, and this week's XB TV Work of the Week is Nisos. Remember him, Randy? Nobody's heard from him forever. Well, he's still here, and here he is working on the outside with the yellow cap, having his first work back since winning the Robert B. Lewis Stakes on February the 3rd. He worked half a mile in 47-3 in company with a Baffert 3-year-old filly. Her name is Halone. Nisos has won all 3 of his lifetime starts, including back-to-back Grade 3 stakes. Bob Baffert said no plans have been formed yet regarding his last start. Now, right after Nisos, Eagle's Flight also worked for trainer John Sadler, having his first work back as well. So lots of things going on at Santa Anita.
Well, the big racing returns to Keeneland this weekend, where you have 2 major stakes races, the Perryville and the Raven Run. Perryville is a very interesting race with some really fast horses in there. As everyone knows, I'm the president of the Bookham Dano fan club, so I'm obviously going to pick him. And you would like him for a couple of reasons, even if you weren't a member of our fan club. The horse is a Grade 1 winner. His numbers, his buyer numbers, he throws in those hundreds, 101, 104. Nobody else in this field does that. How about the way this horse is working? October 5th at Monmouth, 5 furlongs in 57-2. But there's some tough horses in there he's got to beat. Knightsbridge is very interesting. Again, doesn't have the figures that Bookham Dano has, but 2 for 2 for Bill Mott. Has had a lot of time between races. They've been spaced out. But this son of Nyquist is obviously a very talented horse. But no surprise, I'm going for Bookham Dano.
You are not only the president of the Bookham Dano fan club, you're the CEO, the founder. Yeah, but for good reason. I mean, we've been talking about Bookham Dano since Forever Young beat him in a photo in the Saudi Derby. I mean, way back in February, I'm trying to do a speed figure for the Saudi Derby. right? And it kept coming up based on some of the American horses over there. It kept coming up at 100. And people were telling me it can't be 100. He only beat Bookham Dano, a New Jersey bred, by a head. And I'm like, I don't care. But I know how fast they ran in this race. And Bookham Dano ran a 100, the equivalent of a 100 Beyer speed figure. And I was on the Bookham Dano soapbox because of that way back in February. And in his 3 races since then, it's been nothing but triple-digit Beyer speed figures. In his last race, the Jerkins, I think you can make the case that he ran even better than his 104 Beyer speed figure would indicate, given the fact that he was so far back early in the race, 8.5 lengths back. What a really nice racehorse this has turned out to be. And I think they're doing the right thing by him since he's a 3-year-old. He's a Jersey bred. He's a gelding. They want to keep him running to forego the Breeders' Cup this year and focus on a little more, maybe, longevity to his career. Knightsbridge is a fascinating horse. Henro's not a bad horse either for your exotics. The rail is not the best place to be in a 7-furlong stakes anywhere, but he's 12-1 in the morning line. He's coming off a 97 Beyer in a race at Churchill, the Harrods Creek, and he's had a couple of other 90-plus speed figs. So I love this race. This is a really, really interesting race with some very promising horses going forward. Even Locked in there, making his first start since he was 3rd behind Fierceness and Muth in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But I don't think he's as much of a 7/8 horse as he is a distance horse. They're just using this race, I think, to get him started again. Great race.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the 9th race is the Raven Run, and this race has produced a Breeders' Cup winner. In 2018, Shamrock Rose won it and then ran back and won the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mayor Sprint. Same thing, though. You have 3-year-old fillies in here, and like we've been talking about throughout the show, that the American trainers are not keen on running 3-year-olds against older horses in these big races unless they're just totally standout. This race, as Randy mentioned, didn't come up quite as tough as the Perryville. I kind of like Emery. The horse was on a 3-race losing streak and lost last time out to Ways and Means in the test. There's no, there's no knocking that kind of performance. He ran against a very fast horse, and I don't see anybody else in here to really get too excited about. Emery on the figures, on the Beyer numbers, is definitely among the fastest horses in the race. Was there another one? I was taking a look at My Main Squeeze. Mike Maker is so ice cold. It's unbelievable. These PPs were printed up on looking at a Tuesday, so it will change by the time the race comes up. But he's 0 for 17 at Keeneland with 1 second and no thirds.
He's now 1 for 19 on the updated formulator DRF past performances, but your point is still well taken for a trainer like Mike Maker, who you can pretty reliably count on to win at a much higher percentage than that, especially on the turf with horses going long. That's a bit unusual. My Main Squeeze has been an outstanding New York bred who has been very well tested against open company. Won the 8 Bells this year and beat Impel, if you remember. That was a Juddmonte Brad Cox horse that was a heavy favorite, if I recall, in that particular race. And My Main Squeeze just beat her on the up and up, and she just comes off a 5-length win in the Dogwood last time out with a decent Beyer. So I think the morning line, and you as well, Bill, I think, in my opinion, those are the 2 horses to focus on there. Vivi's Dream for Kenny McPeak was very highly touted when she was running against Tarifa at the fairgrounds this winter. She's kind of just getting rolling again. But Emery and My Main Squeeze on paper, I think, look like the 2 best in there.
A couple of very prominent jockeys reached a big milestone last week. Both Irad Ortiz and Paco Lopez picked up their 4,000th winners. Congratulations to them. But I was looking at the totals and playing around with the numbers, and it made me realize they say records are meant to be broken. Not this one. Russell Bays has won 12,842 winners. Now you say, okay, Irad is a young guy. He's got a lot of years left. He wins a ton of races. Certainly he's going to be up there and going after Bays because, like I said, he's one of the best jockeys of all time. No, he averages 285 winners a year. It would take him 31 years at this rate to catch Russell Bays. And the difference is, this is what we see because there's so much less racing now. I'm sure in Russell Bays, in the heyday of Russell Bays' era, that wherever he was riding, probably in Northern California, there would be at least 5 days of racing, maybe 6. Now everybody runs 2 and 3 days. So the jockeys don't get that kind of opportunity. And, Paco, with his 4,000, he's not ever going to come close to these guys. But, that's it. There's records that may not be broken. I can't see anyone even passing Shoemaker, who's got 88.33.
That's a really interesting point you brought up, Bill. I hadn't really considered before how the fewer racing days that we're seeing now might impact some of these jockey records and all that. You could take that to other extremes, right? You could say that, with smaller fields now than there were back in the day, it makes it easier for jockeys to win races because they have fewer horses to beat in each individual race. But I don't know where you would end with that. Russell Bays obviously dominated the Northern California circuit to an extent that no other jockey dominated any other circuit, with the possible exception of Pat Day in Kentucky way back in the day. So it's going to be really tough to beat Russell Bays' records. But yeah, when you're in the middle of a situation like this where IRAD is winning so many races at a major circuit like NYRA, I think sometimes you tend to not appreciate it as much as maybe we would when we look back to, Pinkai and Eddie Delahousse and Chris McCarron and Gary Stevens and Jerry Bailey and all of these jockeys from the old days, so to speak. But IRAD's right up there in terms of what he's been able to accomplish. Will he be able to catch Russell Bays? I agree with you. That's going to be a tough road to go down. Normally, when we talk about jockeys, I look to my left because Bailey is sitting right here. I say, Jerry, you take all the jockey conversation and I'll stick to the horses. But that's a really interesting point. The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds, which dipped into the European sales market, acquiring the Group Place 2-year-old Revolutionnaire at the ARC sale on October the 5th. Revolutionnaire will soon join the Christophe Clement barn. And Miguel Clement, of course, in America. You'll see all of West Point's recent additions if you go to www.westpointtb.com. Speaking of the Clement barn, on Saturday, they will have another representative for West Point at the National Steeplechase Association, the NSA card at Far Hills, New Jersey, where Winning Spirit will compete over 2 miles on the flat in the $150,000 John Forbes Memorial Stakes. Then the next day, transition back to the normal racing that we like to cover, where Atomic Blonde will take on a full field in the Grade 3 Dowager Stakes at Keeneland. A lot on the table for West Point Thoroughbreds.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
Well, that is a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my partners, Randy Moss, Zoe Kevin. She had to duck out a little bit early, but that's okay. Our guest of the week, Mike Smith, and our editors and producers, Katie Petruniak, Anthony LaRocca, and Aaliyah LaRocca. Hope you enjoyed listening this week. Catch up with you again next week.